Talking about next generation. Hi, I'm Nick, and this is Required Reading on Retro Games with Nick. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Required Reading. As you can see from our cover page, we are going to go over the premiere issue of Next Generation magazine. Cover date, let me double check. Need to go in a couple of pages. Cover date. Where's the cover date? But anyways, dated late 94, early 95. So around the same time that we're currently looking at things for PC Gamer. And the reason why I decided to go for this magazine next instead of continuing with our usual sequence and moving on to the PlayStation magazines is that I wanted something that was a little bit more cross-industry in this time period, right? We really only are looking at PC Gamer at this time. And I would like to try to understand a little bit more what the industry was like. And the other thing is that this magazine also has a different cut, or at least pretends to want to have a different cut, where it's a little bit more serious, a little bit more adult. It's not really focused on showing you a billion screenshots from the various games. It's really more about talking about the industry secrets and things that are happening behind the scenes that the consumer might not be able to see. So it seemed interesting to actually just read through, at the very least, this premiere issue, sort of see what's happening. There will not be a 60 Minutes This Way based on this. They have some reviews in there, but they're short, and again, that's not really the reason why I'm reading this particular magazine. So we will just read through it over the course of, I think, 2 episodes, and then move on to our, I think PSM comes first, PSM issue 2 after that. Right from the bat, interesting that they have right on the cover the price in US and Canada dollars, which parity, which definitely not the case these days, but also in yen, British pounds, and German marks. DM is Deutsche Mark. Also gives you some idea of how things were valued around the time, right? $5 became 600 yen, $5 became £4, and 9 marks. Okay. Welcome to a new kind of video game magazine. We know who you are. You're a dedicated gamer who hungers for knowledge of the games and systems of today and tomorrow. You're interested in the very best the gaming world has to offer. The unique, the experimental, the cutting edge. You want the first word on the new issues and the last word on the old. You have sophisticated tastes, have been playing longer than most, and know what makes a game great. These are revolutionary times. The video gaming world is in turmoil as 16-bit gives way to the 32-bit and beyond. CD-ROM is still in the process of proving itself as a valuable interactive medium. As 3DO, Atari, and Philips strive to provide next-generation platforms, the Japanese giants of Sony, Sega, and Nintendo circle for the kill. Play-by-cable is almost upon us, while the information superhighway offers plenty of opportunity for joyriders. Hollywood continues its invasion. Virtual reality looms. Never before has the world of video gaming seen so much opportunity and so much confusion. You need a revolutionary magazine, dedicated to covering the games and systems of tomorrow, following the newest in trends, with full-time news hounds in Japan and Europe, written by the best in the business. To cut through the hype, to bring you the facts, to keep your finger on the pulse. Because when you're caught in the crossfire of the biggest platform wars of all time, you need reliable information. Welcome to Next Generation. Should I actually read this two-sided? That's we can probably make this two-sided. Okay. um. Yeah. Okay. Let's sort of see what we have. Something about the 3DO with Trip Hawkins. 3DO, a notable failure. Talking about the looming video game wars of 1995. You can see a PlayStation Had the PlayStation come out yet at the time? Sony PlayStation. Oh my god, just give me the Wikipedia. Give me the actual PlayStation console. Came out in Japan. Where's the release date? Released. Yep, December 1994. So it was, it depends on when they actually wrote the articles or whatnot, but it might have actually legitimately been out in Japan by the time that this issue went into print. It would be roughly another year. September 95 is when it launched in North America and Europe. The violence tapes. Ooh, talking about violence in video games and what Congress was doing at the time, I guess. And then news, previews, and ratings. All right. The Genesis I think was so wild because of how many expansions and things were created for it that only ended up having like a handful of games each. It's kind of wild. Mommy, what are those two Sega machines doing? They're making an arcade system, dear. Alright, first article, is it now or never for 3DO? There was always going to be a window of opportunity. Sega and Nintendo would profitably milk the 16-bit market long after a small but significant number of gamers demanded better. And right now, these early adopters have only 3DO to turn to. But as the Japanese console giant circles for the kill, the window is closing fast. So next generation asks Trip Hawkins, is it now or never for 3DO? After a shaky start, 3DO is arguably the hottest games machine in the US right now. The current price for a 3DO unit is realistic at $399, FIFA International Soccer and Road Rash offer state-of-the-art gameplay, and there's still no serious competition. But this will change. As next generation goes to press, Sony's PlayStation and Sega Saturn are launching in Japan. Nintendo's Ultra 64, while still in development, promises revolutionary power. Add to the confusion a glut of alternative systems from Atari, SNK, NEC, Commodore, and Philips, and it's easy to see that 1995 will witness the most bloody format wars of all time. And if 3DO is to survive, if Trip Hawkins' dream is to become reality, then it needs to make maximum advantage of its head start. It needs to establish itself now. Many game developers are looking at 3DO's sales this holiday season before deciding whether to continue further development, and machines live or die by such decisions. Which means that Trip Hawkins has to convince you to buy a 3DO system today. A golden opportunity. Next generation. So, in the holiday season of 1994 and the start of 1995, is everything in place for 3DO? Trip. Absolutely. NG. What's missing from this golden opportunity? Trip. The only thing that always takes time is awareness. Someone once told me that market researchers had determined that the growth rate for the new products was very similar to the growth rate of the bubonic plague. For consumers to really understand something, they have to find out all about it from someone else. Other than this, I don't think anything is missing as such. Let me reread that completely bonkers quote. The only thing that always takes time is awareness. Someone once told me that market researchers had determined the growth rate for new products was very similar to the growth rate of the bubonic plague. For consumers to really understand something, they have to find out all about it from someone else. Talking about viral stuff before that was a term, huh? NG. So 3DO must strike while the iron is hot. Never again will 3DO have the next generation market so much to itself. How many machines must 3DO sell this holiday season to capitalize on this head start and make 3DO a system that third-party game developers can afford to ignore? Trip. It's not the absolute hardware numbers that matter, it's how much software is going to be consumed. For, say, a machine like the Sega Genesis, by the time the installed hardware base got to 500,000, software sales were at 2 million per year. Well, we've already gotten to 2 million software sales in less than a year and with a worldwide installed base of 200,000. So one of the things this says about 3DO is that the software is better. The users are buying more software, and so economically it's going to be a more attractive business on a smaller installed base than a cartridge machine. Plus, the margin structure is so much more profitable because CDs are so much cheaper to manufacture than cartridges. NG. But even with a software-hungry audience, you still have to sell a sufficient number of units. Trip. I don't think there's a magic number for sales this Christmas. I think that the astute software companies realize that the profit is already there. We have 13 titles already that have done over 50,000 units. And that's a benchmark that a lot of companies will look at. 50,000 sales of a CD-ROM title is around 1.5 million revenue for a software house, and if I spend half of that on my development budget and then some marketing, I'm still making good profit. NG. How much is the Japanese market subsidizing a poorer US install base? Trip. The Japanese market got off to a faster start, and the presence of this market is very attractive to software developers. Matsuhita and Sanyo are both trying to do software distribution, and they will now step in and make upfront purchase orders for a very large number of units. It's very typical in Japan that a piece of software will get an upfront order of anything from 25,000 to 60,000 units. Combine this with the sales potential of the US, and the economics become very attractive. NG. So you don't feel there is anything to prove to the software development community in terms of sales numbers this holiday season? Personally, how many 3DO units do you want to sell? Trip. Over a longer period of time, I'm looking at a target of 2 million. When we get our install base up to the size, it means we will make it as a company. Right now we are losing money. We have to get our install base up to that size before we start making money and can continue indefinitely. I'm going to look this up right now. 3DO console. The 3DO, which by the way started selling at $700, so they must have really slashed down the price to get it to $300. Worldwide sold from 1.38 to 2 million and was discontinued worldwide in 1996. What made this special, I don't know if the magazine is going to talk about it, is that 3DO didn't actually make the thing. 3DO had developed some proprietary software and proprietary hardware schematics, and then it let manufacturers actually make the console, which is wild. It just licensed the hardware to other companies for manufacturing. Also, Matsuhita is what now is called Panasonic. But yeah, it will fall flat on its face in 1 year. So, something to keep in mind as we read through the rest of this interview. NG. But the current market conditions won't remain indefinitely. In 1995, 9 new systems will enter the marketplace. Store shelves, for example, only have room for so many products. There can be room for everybody. Trip. You can say that, but the amount of space that can justifiably be devoted to 16-bit cartridge products a year from now will be a lot less than it has been in the last few years. Retailers need new products to fill this gap. I look at it like this. If a customer bought a 16-bit machine, how many years it is until they've done everything they can do with it? Let's just say it's 3 years. Well, last year there was only 500,000 people like that, and at the end of this year there will be 5 million people in that situation. Next year there will be 15 million. NG. Sure, this evolution is inevitable, hence there was always going to be a window of opportunity for 3DO. Sega and Nintendo would profitably continue with the 16-bit market long after a small but significant percentage of gamers demanded something better. These people are your target audience right now. But a year from now, this demand will be big enough to attract the big boys. 3DO will be fighting nose-to-nose with Sega, Nintendo, and Sony. Surely the market can't support 4 multi-million-dollar platforms. We're even ignoring 32X, CDI, and Jaguar in 1995. Someone has to fail, right? Trip. The home computer market, typically, has supported at least that many formats. If you look at the 1980s, you had home machines in the US ranging from the Apple II to the Commodore 64, the Nintendo, the IBM PC, the Macintosh. There's always been a fairly high level of confusion that has gone on since the industry began. It's unfortunate, but it's too bad, but generally the market has supported a lot of different machines. Trashing the competition. NG. So what, albeit partisan advice, would you give to people considering buying a rival game system to the 3DO? Trip. I think consumers who are buying the CDI product probably aren't game players because anybody who plays games knows that games are not the CDI's forte. Aside from that, philosophically, there is a lot in common between CDI and 3DO in that they are the only two products on the market that support MPEG expansion, video CD capabilities. And they are the only products that support all the optical disc format standards, including codec and photo CD. So, if you're looking for versatility, you're probably looking at CDI and 3DO. And if they are game players, then they should pick 3DO. NG. How about Jaguar? We believe that to be a real competitor in this market, you have got to have about 500 million in capital. Now, the 3DO company is more than 100 million, and then we have Matsuhita, our other hardware partners, and then all of our software partners, and all of these companies together are making this kind of investment. Atari really doesn't have any partners, and they don't have much money themselves. So I personally think it's facetious for them to think that they can even compete. This is a fairly basic business reality for them, and you can see that over the past year, in fact over the past several years, there's been a trail of broken promises to the marketplace. And frankly, what they say about the product is very misleading. They've gotten pretty far on pure smoke and mirrors, but I think that after this Christmas, the reality will be very clear to people. A lot of the partner is like, yeah, you gotta have like 500 million to be competitive in this business, and we have 100, but we have partners. Partners count, okay? They count. NG, how about 32X? Trip. Sega has a very large installed base. And any Sega Genesis customer who wants to spend a very small amount of money and get better gaming can do that with a 32X. The weakness is that it's not a viable long-term format, it's not compatible with Sega's next generation, so basically will be discarded within a year or two. It will never be really heavily supported by third-party software companies because they know that it will have a very short shelf life. I thought Genesis was such a great product that I gave one for free to every Electronic Arts employee, but 32X is just a stopgap. It's a financial event for Sega as a company. It's not a good product for consumers. NG. What about people holding out for 1995's next generation Japanese consoles? How about Ultra 64 and Saturn? Trip. A lot of insiders have a pretty strong feeling that Nintendo's Ultra 64 won't be in the market for 95. A lot of people who are pretty dialed into their R&D activities see it as more a product for the second quarter 96. Nintendo just selected the RAM bus memory architecture a couple of months ago, August, and it's going to take a long time to implement a machine using this architecture. Okay, they've shown the coin-op hardware, but the home system is a lot different. The Saturn is a very troubled project. A lot of people don't believe it will ever be marketed outside of Japan, so these factors will make the market a lot less cluttered. So I went actually and dug up the history of the Saturn, except I accidentally paused the recording, so I lost all of that, which happens. He is not entirely wrong on both of these counts. Now, I don't know much about the Saturn. I never played it, even in emulation. It's not something I really ever dealt with. But to my understanding, and by skimming through the Wikipedia article for the Sega Saturn, they launched in '94 in Japan. And at the same time, they launched 32X in the US. And then to try and undercut Sony, they launched the Sega Saturn in America. They announced it at E3, and they were like, and it's available right now. Which, if you think about it, it's kind of wild that they really did that. I think twice, because maybe this is the console I'm thinking about. But regardless, they had sent a shipment to some places, but not to others. For example, no Best Buy or no Walmart. And so people got pissed because of it, and some smaller stores even decided to just not carry Saturn at all because of the snub. Add to that the fact that it was $100 more expensive than the PlayStation that launched a couple of months later, and that the PlayStation had a much stronger launch lineup because they followed their plan instead of trying to anticipate it. And so the Saturn only ended up having 6 launch games. Add to that some political issues within Sega of America versus Sega of Japan, and within a couple of years, the Saturn was basically as good as dead. Not to say that the 3DO would live much longer, you know. It has its own problems, as we're about to see in the interview. But he was, at the very least, correct in his assessment of the 32X and in some ways of the Saturn. And I believe it was also correct. I think the Nintendo 64 launched in 96. It launched June 96 in Japan, September 96 in North America. March 97 in Europe, which is where I was. So we got a full year later. Okay. Continuing the interview. NG. So your warning to someone who's looking for a new games machine but also waiting for next year's new hardware systems would be that the machines might not turn up on time. Trip. Partly, but also it's inevitable that in every category of consumer electronics there will always be new models released. Existing ones will become less expensive and new features will be added. Any consumer of any type of technology product knows that if they wait, they can get something better and they can get something cheaper. But we're all going to be dead matter in 100 years, so at some point you have to jump in and start enjoying your life. NG. Fine, but then the flip side of this coin is that consumers also realize that what they buy could be out of date in a year. Trip. Ordinarily, yes, but I think that philosophically 3DO has a very different approach from everyone else. In the whole history of video game hardware, companies have asked consumers to throw everything away every few years and start over. They say the same things to developers and to retailers. We think customers should have true upgrade paths to the next generation, not just peripherals than to improve performance. And this next generation should be backward compatible so that all the software you already have will continue to be viable. This way, developers will also get to build on what they already know. They don't want to upscale projects to work on our M2 hardware. They use the same tools and the same skills. They've already made an investment and already significantly on that learning curve. That's what will make the PlayStation 2 so successful in the end, in the long term. M2, codename Bulldog. NG. Taking a look at Sega CD titles or the ridiculous state of the PC industry, doesn't the pursuit of backward compatibility simply anchor machines to the past and restrict performance? Trip. Things can continue to evolve. For example, our operating system is already in its third generation, and each generation gets smaller, which frees up more memory for applications. It gets faster and adds new features. The real issue is, how difficult is it to get your next generation hardware to perform on the older generation of hardware, and in our case, because of the level of technology, it's very easy to do that. NG. Manufacturers of 3DO systems, such as Gold Star and Panasonic Matsuhita, have to make profit purely on hardware sales. But a company like Sega can take a loss on hardware because it knows it'll make a killing on the software. So how can 3DO possibly compete on pricing? Trip. The business models are more similar than you might think. First of all, a company like Sony has to pay for all their own R&D, whereas 3DO is going to spend more than $100 million on technology development. And right there, that's a tremendous cost saving to each manufacturer who uses our technology. Second thing is, a 3DO manufacturer shares the majority of the marketing burden with all the other 3DO companies. So this overhead is not as high, and that's another thing that has to be factored into your cost. A company like Sony has to do all its own software evangelism, but we do that with the 3DO format. The point is that the major hardware 3DO partners own a big chunk of the 3DO company, so they are sharing in the royalty stream of 3DO, and they publish their own software. At the end of the day, there is really not that much difference. To me, this answer is what really shows why 3DO ultimately failed. It's like, no, we're not that different. We do the R&D and we just give them the licensed product, right? So that's not a problem. They share the marketing, which is true. But both of those are not like the R&D is necessary to stay on top, and the marketing is of course necessary to sell your console. The money that comes in is really mostly through the games, right? That's always how all these companies have been making money. They always sold the console at either a loss or at a very tiny profit, but they encourage you to purchase more and more and more games. It seems like he's saying that their solution to that is that, well, all the partners have shares of 3DO, so if we do well, the stock goes up, and so they make the money. But I don't think it actually works that way, right? It's not like if 3DO actually made, I don't know, let's say $1 million by selling a bunch of games, that's gonna evenly divide those up between the various partners depending on which ownership stake they have in the company. That's not how that works. The ownership stake is in the stock. So it's not liquid money that these other companies get. Right? And so I think this is where he's trying to talk himself into believing what he's saying. But this is the root of why the 3DO as a concept was intriguing but ultimately failed. NG. Scheduled for release next fall is M2. At the moment, you're proposing a plug-in accessory for existing 3DO machines. Surely there has to be a standalone 3DO2 planned. Trip. There will be at some point. NG. A new standalone machine will benefit from having had over a year to rethink the manufacture of the original 3DO system. How have your engineers managed to reduce the cost of manufacturing a 3DO? Trip. The three biggest chips, they are all custom parts, have been combined into one which we call the Anvil. And this chip is now available, and most of our manufacturing partners will be switching over to production of the use of the Anvil in the early parts of 1995. NG. This is to make a cheaper 3DO2 a big possibility. Will a new machine incorporate MPEG-1 or MPEG-2 video hardware? Trip. We'll continue to support both. But right now we're not ready to talk about the details of how we're going to implement it. NG. So tell us about the heart of M2. Trip. M2 basically has two key chips in it. There is a PowerPC chip that was custom designed by IBM and Motorola to fit in our 3D architecture perfectly, and then the other chip is a custom ASIC. This chip will do most of the other processing for graphics and audio and video. NG. Why choose PowerPC technology to be such a key part of 3DO's future? Trip. IBM has a superior proprietary semiconductor process, and both IBM and Motorola have the capability for multiple design teams and multiple processors in their family. So you have a lot of scalability when you need to move up to higher performance. And since Apple and IBM are using the PowerPC, that will drive the cost down, so you're not just depending on 3DO hardware sales to reduce costs. NG. And how will this change game playing on a 3DO? Trip. One consequence is improved polygon rendering. We thought that in a 1995 time frame, most of the existing genres in software are basically 2D backgrounds, 2D foregrounds, or a 3D background with a 2D foreground. NG, which is currently 3DO's strongest forte. Trip. Right. So the 3DO can do all the existing genres. But the one area that's a new paradigm is 3D background with a 3D foreground using 3D polygon rendering for the characters themselves, such as Daytona USA. And you need tremendously high polygon performance to achieve that. Now you look at something like Virtua Fighter, which is at this point the only title of its kind where the fighters look like origami. Do you mean origami there, Trip? And that machine is a pretty hot piece of hardware. That machine will do something like almost 200,000 polygons per second, but clearly it's not good enough. We want to make a quantum leap that really delivers this power to generate over 1 million polygons per second. And that's what we've done. NG. But numbers don't always tell the whole story. So Trip, just to make this clear, you're saying that the 3DO with M2 will be able to run Virtua Fighter, as in the arcade, without breaking a sweat? Trip. Certainly from the standpoint of computing, it's a much higher performance from what I know. Of course, the difference with arcade machines is that they have a tremendous amount of ROM, so that's one point to remember. But of course, as RAM prices come down, you get more and more RAM in home machines, and eventually even in this difference will go away. NG. Yes, in the future perhaps, but in the meantime, the process of sucking data off a CD is notoriously slow. Trip. Yeah, but there's a whole lot more RAM, 12 megabits, in a 3DO than the amount of ROM that's on a typical video game cartridge. So if you wanted to just load something in RAM and execute it under RAM, as with titles Demolition Man and Burning Soldier, you can. NG. How much will M2 cost? Trip. We are not ready to talk about pricing, but it will be very aggressive. NG. Because news of M2 and the next generation of 3DO hardware is out, One that keep people from buying 3DO knowing that in 6 months they'll need to invest again? Trip. The way consumers behave is that when they are ready for something new, they get something new. And frankly, with our strategy, they know they have a product line they can grow with. It's not going to become obsolete. So, was there like a second generation 3DO kind of thing? I'm looking at the Wikipedia page for 3DO. But I don't see anything about this M2 chip. Yeah, eventually the M2 project was cancelled. Ah, classic. Alright, next up. But if you convince the gamers. NG. In the hype-tinted eyes of the gaming industry, 3DO was everyone's savior 18 months ago. It was dead and buried 6 months ago, but right now it's clawing back significant respect as a viable platform. On the street and in consumers' eyes, how is 3DO perceived? Trip. I think the people who have actually seen the product are very impressed with it. I hear stories all the time from people who talk about how completely blown away their friends are when they see 3DO for the first time. And I have personally shown 3DO to a lot of adults, not just video game fans, and they are astonished at the effect it is having on their entire family. It's a grassroots kind of thing. It reminds me of what it was like when I was back at Apple in the 1970s because nobody understood personal computing. Even journalists weren't using word processors. We would try to explain why the journalists would be happy to use the word processors and they didn't really grasp it. NG. Could this explain why sales haven't been spectacular so far? A quote from yourself, actually, to Joe Flower from Wired 1.2. Anytime you get a big jump in performance, 500,000 or so people will buy it, no matter what you do in terms of marketing and support. Look at the Atari ST. They did everything wrong and they still sold 500,000. 3DO hasn't sold anywhere near 500,000, so do these early adopters no longer exist, or does 3DO simply not offer a big jump in performance? I like that they're not pulling punches, right? They're very much. They seem to be asking the hard questions of this guy. Trip. It's just a matter of time. If you look at innovative formats in the past, they've taken anywhere from 2 to 4 years to reach the 500,000 number. We're going to reach it faster. If you look at the history of the industry, the fastest selling product is Super Nintendo. By the time Nintendo really established its franchise, it followed along with its 8-bit product, which was the second fastest selling product in the industry's history. After these, the products that are competing for the third fastest selling would be Sega CD, 3DO, and Sega Genesis. They're all about in the same ballpark, and we're way ahead of anybody else further down that list, and these are products like the IBM PC, Macintosh, Commodore 64. NG. So what happened to the dream? When 3DO was launched, much was made of the idea of a global interactive standard and the creation of an autonomous multimedia little black box that would replace the household's VCR, audio system, computer, telephone, fax, etc. But in the rush for hardware sales this holiday, 3DO's future is riding solely on video games. Trip. I don't think anybody has abandoned those dreams. I think you have to look at these kind of changes as being more glacial. The real question is, how long will it take? It may take 5 years, maybe it will be 10 years before things calm down and a clear format standard emerges. It is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And companies like Sony, who have tried to establish similar standards, have demonstrated in the past that it will switch horses when it becomes clear that what they are doing is not the winning approach. NG. And you're keeping the doors open? Trip. Yeah, we don't have any desire to exclude anybody, and we try to look at it not from perspective of greed or control. What we want to do is create a business model that is profitable for all the companies that are involved. That's the only hope for standardization. NG. But the typical behavior of third parties could ensure that this global standard never happens, although a standard would be universally acknowledged as a good thing. In the real world, very few software companies turn down a chance to be sole providers of software to what could be the next big thing. The profit potential is just too great. So you have Namco leaping into bed with Sony, companies like Ocean and Ubisoft continuing support for Jaguar. Each new system has software developed for it, and the confusion continues. Trip. Actually, that's typically not what software developers are thinking. Sometimes they are motivated creatively. So if a company has really hot technology they can just resist, they want to do something with it, they really want to express themselves creatively. It happens sometimes, but they'll typically only support a few formats if it makes business sense. And this is based more on fear. They are uncertain as to what will happen. They can't put all their eggs in one basket. NG. So you think it's fear that's preventing the standard from easily establishing itself? Trip. In many ways, this industry is like a dysfunctional family where everyone has been horribly abused. That's a take. Since I've been in the industry, there has been over 200 different formats. That's like 10 every year. So as a software developer, you get accustomed to the idea that standardization is a pipe dream. It could never happen in our lifetime, so basically you had better not count on it. So for that reason, if a company comes along that has a credible strategy, and they are a credible company and have good technology, it's very hard to ignore it. You have to think about the risk of what might happen if they end up having 20 or 30% of the market. Even though the software companies have the power to force the hardware companies to standardize, they're afraid to use it. Instead, they say, we'll do a little bit on this one, a little bit on this one, and a little bit on this one, and we'll let the consumer decide. And, well, of course, the consumer gets confused and they maybe don't buy anything at all. NG. So how do you break this vicious circle? Trip. First of all, you have to have a winning technology. If you don't have the best technology, then nobody's going to take you seriously. Second of all, you've got to have a business model that's a win-win. I mean, if the model is not going to be profitable for everybody, then obviously they aren't going to support it. NG. So that's the global standard, a dream for the future. What about the all-in-one multimedia box that 3DO was initially touted as the first step toward? Are games a Trojan horse to get 3DO systems into the home today, knowing that the future video CD or play-by-cable market could be very lucrative? Or is it the other way around, and the little black box concept is just a clever marketing ploy to simply sell more games? Trip. I think the simple answer is that there has to be a customer who wants something in order for a new product to get into a home. There are a lot of people out there who want the next step in gaming, and that becomes the compelling reason why this technology moves forward. Once it gets into a household, that's when other people in the household discover that this isn't what they thought it was. It's not just something for Johnny to play with, it's something that everyone in the family can use. However, it's going to take a very long time before the technology makes everything we have planned feasible. NG. So is this concept of 3DO evolving into an all-in-one video hi-fi computer setup still on a back burner for 3DO right now? Trip. Yeah, but there's definitely some flame under it, not too far back on the stove. Being big in Japan. NG. Are you happy with the level of third-party software support 3DO has received? Trip. Yes, very happy. If you look at industry history, no home computer or home video game system has ever had remotely this level of third-party support in its first year. NG. You must be especially happy that EA has come through with some great software. Trip. Well, Electronic Arts is our biggest shareholder, and that's where the 3-year project started. Frankly, everyone was always counting on software support from Electronic Arts. It was disappointing last fall because EA, like other companies, was finding that to make really great titles like Road Rash, it was just taking longer than they had originally thought. NG. How important is it that Konami and Capcom are now actively developing? Trip. It is an incredibly positive thing for us. If you look at the Sega Genesis, it wasn't until it was 3 years old that the big Japanese arcade companies supported it. And here's 3DO, and we haven't even had our first birthday, and we're almost ready to release titles. NG. One reason that killer software has been in short supply is that it's not just a new system that developers are working with, but a whole new type of game. All of a sudden, designers are working with a CD format and considerably more powerful hardware than they've been used to. Is there a danger that 3DO is merely giving free software development lessons for all the future systems? Trip smiles. It's always better to be in the lead. Whether Trip Hawkins' plan come to fruition, only time will tell. Next Generation sincerely wishes the 3DO company the best of luck. Our photographer actually has the last word in the interview. I didn't notice your gray hairs before, he teases. Trip bristles, then laughs. It's a young industry, he replies, but it makes you grow old fast. Next month, Mr. Shigeru Miyamoto, Nintendo's most influential games guru and the creator of Mario, reveals his secrets to Next Generation. budding games designers, take note. So why 3DO? No real reason, but it does fit well with audio and video. Stupid. Yeah, this was, I think, an interesting interview. I feel like this interview is making me think that maybe Trip Hawkins is smarter than I thought he was. Um, what really led to the fall of 3DO? Quote from the Wikipedia article. In an interview shortly after the 3DO company dropped support for the system, Trip Hawkins attributed its failure to the model of licensing all hardware manufacturing and software to third parties. He reasoned that for a console to be a success, you needed a single strong company to take the lead in marketing hardware and software, and pointed out that it was essentially a lack of coordination between the 3DO company, Panasonic, and the 3DO software developers, which had led to the console launching with only one game ready. Gee, that's funny. Oh, this is going to be an interview with Next Generation issue number 22, where he will say this in October 1996. It's almost like he's contradicting himself here. And I don't know if he really thought that there was a viable path for it, or if it was just like a great executive that was just like, hey, I can make something happen, let's try it. But yeah, 3DO is gonna spectacularly fail over the course of the next year. Time for the news segment. 32X takes Genesis one step forward. But does Sega take two steps back? 32X would make a fast buck in late 94, but it could cost Sega dearly in 1995. 500,000 Sega 32X units reached retail in late November, and another 500,000 arrived early December, perfectly positioned for the holiday shopping season. Genesis owners can buy their ticket to 32-bit gaming for $159.99, far less than the $399 cost for a 3DO or the $249.95 Jaguar. 32X plugs into the top of a Genesis, bringing a new VDP and twin Hitachi 32-bit RISC processors to the party. See pitch 38. But Next Generation questioned Sega's sense in making an albeit extremely lucrative short-term killing at the expense of focus, impact, and stability come the crucial launch of Saturn in 1995. That 32X will prove to be hugely profitable for Sega of America is unquestionable. Lured away from 16-bit gaming by news of Saturn, PlayStation, and Ultra 64, tempted by 3DO and Jaguar, and then marketed to by the tune of $10 million by Sega itself, many Genesis gamers are desperate to reach that next level. 32X is parent-friendly, it's an add-on or a start-from-scratch replacement for an expensive investment, it's backward compatible with existing software, it undoubtedly offers a significant boost in performance compared to a 486 PC, and it's here now. But there are many industry pundits, including some Sega insiders, who feel that 32X shouldn't have arrived at all. Count the platforms. Sega CD, 32X, 32X Sega CD. That's four separate Sega systems, four separate systems Sega is not committed to, even forgetting Game Gear. Of course, cross-fertilization is possible, but if Sega is to deliver to gamers software that truly takes maximum advantage of its hardware configuration, then resources will have to be spread perilously thin. On the one hand, third-party publishers will welcome a fresh, virgin market to compensate for the flagging 16-bit business. Capcom, who allegedly has over 1 million unsold Street Fighter II cartridges gathering warehouse dust, is a fine example. But on the other hand, all the gearing up for 32-bit development is assumed in CD format, and it's unlikely that many will welcome the cost and risk of continued cartridge manufacturing. That puts the burden of game development back on Sega's shoulders, and the risk of buying into an under-supported system on the game player. Then there's the launch of Saturn. Sega is keen not to stress that 32X is not a stopgap, but concludes that Sega Japan regards November's launch of Saturn as the biggest and most important hardware launch in Sega's history. If Saturn is to launch in the US next fall, with anywhere near the amount of momentum, anticipation, and marketing support needed to take on the singularly focused Sony, then it needs 100% of Sega's effort. And it needs it now. Either Sega isn't behind 32X for the long haul, or it's in danger of skimping on its preparation for the big battle ahead. Of course, Sega argues that 32X and Saturn are targeted at two distinct markets, and that promoting one doesn't necessarily sacrificing the others. That promoting one doesn't necessitate sacrificing the other. Saturn will be at a price point that will not make it a mass market item, Sega America President Tom Kalinske told the Next Generation correspondent. So in terms of volume and keeping the category exciting, it's Genesis and 32X. But with Sony issuing threats of launching PlayStation at $300, one has to question either Saturn's competitiveness or Kalinsky's definition of what constitutes a mass market. Either way, 32X is now cashing in all the brand loyalty Sega has succeeded in nurturing, leaving Saturn to fend for itself. The $10 million marketing push behind 32X will presumably extend throughout 1995, if indeed 32X is not simply a stopgap, and overlap Saturn's launch next fall. The consumer will simply become more confused, the stores will have to choose what systems to fill their limited shelf space with, and Sega may well find itself with one or more of its platforms left out in the cold. The bottom line is that 32X offers Genesis gamers a way to boost their system's performance at a rock-bottom price. But with 32X games costing $70 and a significant support from third-party publishers still in doubt, it may not be the bargain first appears. And if 32X is the cause of Sega even slightly taking its eye off in the launch of Saturn, then Sega could well regret the day it decided to bet on too many horses. There's a list of 32X games, and some of them are PC ports. There's apparently Castlevania for 32X, which I don't think it's Bloodlines. Castlevania 32X. Cancelled Castlevania game. They would eventually go and work on Symphony of the Night. That's funny. What else? It's your pretty standard set of things, right? It's like arcade games and arcade ports. None of these games really worth much of a damn, I think. Yeah, this is just random data. US launch for Neo Geo CD. Bearing a ready-made range of arcade-quality games, SNK's Neo Geo CD heads out for the US. 4 years after SNK's first unleashed its potent Neo Geo console in Japan, the Osaka-based company had launched a more determined attack on the domestic market with the introduction of the Neo Geo CD, a repackaged, restyled, and remarketed version of the arcade system that achieved limited penetration into the home. SNK released a special edition front-loading model in Japan on September 9th. The voracious Japanese buying public consumed all 30,000 units on the first day of sale. From now on, though, a new top-loading model will bear the Neo Geo CD badge. This is the machine that will soon be available officially in the US. Next Generation reporters have managed to take a look at the only units to have left Japan, even before the machine went on sale in Tokyo at the end of October. In technical terms, the top-loading unit is identical to the front-loader. The only differences are superficial. A flip-top lid replaces the motorized CD tray, and the build quality and overall design have been improved. Like the previous model, the new machine's CD drive is a single-speed type, chosen for reasons of cost. The original Neo cartridge specs still apply, though the new machine now has a huge 7 megabytes of DRAM, 512K of VRAM, and 64K of SRAM. SNK will be pricing the new machine at the same level in Japan as the front loader, 50,000 yen. $537 for the hardware only. According to Japanese sources, SNK makes no profit on the new hardware. Although the cost of chipset has naturally decreased since its introduction, the continuing high cost of silicon on the international market means that the system's ample memory, the largest of any console by a huge margin, is a burden that couldn't be absorbed in its retail price. SNK has had to make one major sacrifice to obtain the benefits of CD-ROM: speed. Neo Geo CD games are handicapped by lengthy loading times. Given that some of the recent games approach 200 megabits, those 52 megabits of internal DRAM don't go very far. Most of the game's next generation tested took around 30 seconds to load initially, with subsequent loading taking place when required. Some early lower memory games take even longer because the whole game is loaded onto RAM at the outset, requiring a 40-50 second stream of data at 150k per second, although no further data access is needed once the game is installed in memory. While that's fine for catching up on classics like Magician Lord and NAM 75, 100 Megashock and soon even 200 Megashock games will result in even longer delays. Then to make a cup of coffee, grab a muffin, and watch an episode of The Simpsons. Of course, this problem is not unique to the Neo Geo CD, and in many ways, the delays endured while waiting for games like Samurai Showdown and Fatal Fury 2 to load only serve to heighten the visual and sonic overload that follows. And many games, more than was first announced, will feature re-recorded CD soundtracks, which not only saves on RAM and therefore reduces loading times, but of course means an improvement in sound quality. And if there's one thing Neo Geo CD games can do, it's the production of excellent sound. It's not known how much Neo Geo CD will cost or whether bundle games will be included for the US launch. In the UK, it is known that 2 hardware packs are expected to be made available. One consists of the machine, a joypad, and Fatal Fury for £400. The other comprises the machine plus 2 joypads and 3 games, Fatal Fury, Super Sidekicks 2, and Last Resort, for £500. It is likely that US prices will be lower, hopefully no more than a competitive-ish $500. With SNK taking the traditional Japanese route of using the hardware as a loss leader, software sales are obviously crucial. Games will probably start at $50, rising to $70 for newer titles, which alone makes the system an attractive proposition, given that many Super Nintendo and Genesis games are now weighing in at a hefty $75. SNK is in the enviable position of having a machine that can immediately call upon a back catalog of impressive software. Non-fighter fans may find its lineup fairly unappealing. Well, 12 of the 25 known releases are of the brawling variety, but SNK's library of arcade games includes some great titles. With the loading times can be off-putting, the sheer power of some Neo Geo CD software makes the machine well worth considering. Anyone in doubt should check out Samurai Shodown after playing Street Fighter 2 or Mortal Kombat 2 on the Super Nintendo. It's like reading Next Generation after National Enquirer. Looking at the release titles, bunch of Neo Geo ports. None that I'm particularly familiar with. Neo Geo, the story so far. The Neo Geo home system went on sale in Japan in March 1990, packaged with a 4-button joystick and a memory card. In a market where 8-bit Famicom and PC Engine games were the norm, its arrival was met with general disbelief, and not just because of the price of the software. The technology was more advanced than almost anything available at the time and delivered vivid, powerful games. SNK simultaneously launched a line of card-driven Neo Geo coin-ops, which are still thriving. Given the age of hardware, the Neo Geo spec is still impressive. Apart from the inclusion of an extra 430k VRAM, 64k SRAM, and the 56 megabits of DRAM, the CD machine is virtually identical. At its heart is a 16-bit 68,000 running at 12 MHz, supported by 4 MHz Z80. It can handle up to 4,096 colors on screen from a 16-bit palette, with 3 simultaneous scrolling playfields and up to 380 hardware sprites, plus hardware scaling support. There's also some MIDI sound from a 13-channel Yamaha 2610 chip. High memory, high-priced cartridges, and an entirely arcade-driven software library, no shortage of beat-em-ups, have limited the appeal of SNK's cartridge machine. Now with the Neo Geo CD, SNK is promising both a wider variety of in-house software, a Zelda-like RPG, Crystalis has been held back especially for the format, and greater third-party development. I'm not really familiar with the Neo Geo CD. I mean, this is very much the we have arcade at home kind of machine. Yeah, it feels like this is they tried it out, and then they were kind of just like, nah, we're good. Like, they seem to have quietly discontinued production in 1997. Um, the loading times were a big issue. And they failed to bring a double speed CD reader on the market. Yep, alright. Coin ops stay on cutting edge. Coin op companies flexed their muscles at this year's Tokyo JAMA show. PlayStation and Saturn represent a significant convergence between the performance of home and arcade silicon, but the arcade industry isn't ready to roll over and die just yet. The Japanese Amusement Machine Show provided an opportunity for coin-op hardware to reaffirm its technological superiority over the new consoles. Sponsored by the Japanese Amusement Machine Manufacturers Association, JAMA, and held at Tokyo's Macquarie Messe venue, the AMS rekindled a few old rivalries between the major arcade players and confirmed the increasing lead that Sega and Namco have over the pack. Sega's impressive catalog, matching its incredibly large stand, was headed by a 75% complete Virtua Fighter 2. A stunning texture map sequel to the Japanese hit, the game is expected to arrive in Far Eastern arcades before the turn of the year. Virtua Cop Model 2 was equally impressive and on display. Although it was described as disparagingly by some observers as Leland forces with polygons, playing a trigger-happy policeman with an arsenal of futuristic weapons, your mission is to rid the street of criminals. A simplistic task, but as it turns out, a highly enjoyable one, especially as all the characters react differently according to the situation. The sight of a shotgun blowing your hapless victim across the screen was particularly popular, and these polygons are unbelievable. Namco, the sole Japanese manufacturer to record an increase in profits last year, up 25%, had its new Formula One game, the System 22-based Ace Driver, lined up on the starting grid. Featuring two views and excellent 8-player action, the game was another example of Namco stealing Sega's thunder with its refined System 22 hardware outperforming the current king of the driving game, Daytona USA. Namco's other big showstopper was Tekken. Based on PlayStation's coin-op hardware, the spectacular texture map fighting game was extremely slick, despite being only 40% complete. It lacked some of the visual punch of Virtua Fighter 2, and this early version was far too easy, but as a teaser of future Namco-Sony collaborations, it boded very well indeed. Tekken can easily dent Sega's plans if Namco manages to release the game on schedule before Virtua Fighter 2. Further evidence of the growing crossover between coin-ops and consoles was provided by Sega's long-awaited STV board, development named Titan. Designed as a streamlined version of Saturn, Titan has been optimized for use in the arcade. The twin 32-bit Hitachi processors remain, but the board now boasts more memory, faster serial input-output, and a custom Yamaha soundboard, different from the one found in the Saturn unit, and increased speed. STV's main selling point will be its easy access to a wide range of home Saturn software on both cartridge and CD-ROM. The first STV titles to see the light of day are Golden Axe The Duel and Title Fight 2. Golden Axe, now 50% finished, is a one-on-one beat-em-up with a large colorful characters and a wide range of special moves, although it has little of the charm of the original Golden Axe game. Title Fight 2, yet another boxing game, looks highly polished even though it is still in the early stage of development. Sega is hoping that the ease of cross-platform conversion promised by such games will encourage developers to port titles between arcade and consoles as standard. Development work has already begun on 10 carts designed to prove that the theory works in practice. Sega Namco's preeminent position in the arcade market was threatened this time by Konami. The Kobe-based company previewed a highly ambitious $100,000 simulator ride called Speed King. Next Generation had the opportunity to test it out, and felt slightly the worse for wear after the experience. Taito's Real Punch found a novel way to add a little spice to the classic punch-to-ball game. Before each punch, your face is photographed and digitized. It is then subjected to warping effects based on the strength of your hit. Depending on how well you perform, you can end up with anything from a thick lip to full facial mutilation. Perhaps a version featuring digitized pictures of politicians could work well. Darius Gaiden was another Taito product on display. Third game in the Darius series, it continues the familiar theme but offers several enhancements, including more shields, extra weapons, and hidden areas. The playability of Taito games remain high, but if new products like Space Invaders DX are anything to go by, the company is attempting to stave off the future by reanimating the past. One last note, virtual reality seems to be taking a tortuous route to the arcades, with only 2 VR projects presented at JAMA. Tech War, a joint Sega virtuality effort, was characterized by limited gameplay and unexciting backgrounds. A much better game was Taito's Zone Hunter, a 3D blaster, also produced for virtuality. In all, an impressive lineup of arcade hardware. Head start for Ultra 64. Nintendo is apparently so concerned about the arrival of Saturn and PlayStation in the US next year, spring and autumn respectively, that it is considering shifting the launch of its Ultra 64 home system forward by several months to mid-95. Next Generation has also discovered that the only developers with kits, Rare, Iguana, and DMA, have been shipped to Onyx's while the U64 chipset is being completed. Nintendo is telling its developers that the finished Ultra 64 will deliver the same level of performance as an Onyx, real-time ray tracing of 16-bit color polygons at over 30 FPS, etc. In the meantime, Nintendo has another in-cart chip for the SNES on the way, a 32-bit processor, possibly NEC's V810 for handling fast 3D. I was trying to see if we could spot the bad virtual reality game, but I don't think they have a screenshot of it. Making a Golden Axe fighting game seems like such a stupid idea. Alright. Oh, this is something that was saving RAM, huh? Funny that those existed back then. Save states, baby. Saturn at CSG show launch date set. The CSG show was the perfect opportunity for Sega to reveal its Saturn launch plans and debut software lineup. Putting its lackluster March show well behind, the consumer soft group, CSG, moved to a much larger venue in Ikebukuro, Tokyo, for its latest biannual exhibition. Usually well supported by consumers and exhibitors alike, the event saw as many as 58 companies displaying their most recent wares. Sega's presence at the show coincided with its announcement of the Sega Saturn launch date. In a move designed to Sony, I've never heard that word before, but okay, which shifted the PlayStation launch forward to November 30 to maximize its sales, Sega announced its plans to launch the Saturn on November 22nd. Licensed machines, notably the V Saturn, bearing the name of one of Sega's development partner, JVC, will appear at the same time. Though the price was still undecided at the time Next Generation went to press, it will be about 10% less than the 50,000 yen previously announced. Protected by its usual mob of camera-phobic officials, Sega's booth featured a range of Saturn and 32X games. In the absence of Daytona USA, Panzer Dragoon was the hottest attraction. The game looked almost complete with all 3 views, front, side, and rear, now implemented in an increased level of detail in the backgrounds. The remaining time before release will be taken up with designing more levels. Virtua Fighter, CPH66, was playable, but still a long way from the arcade version. Victory Goal and Gale Racer were also shown, but only a video wall. Despite Sega's decision to release the 32X in Japan after all, the selection of 32X titles previewed at CSG, Metalhead, Star Wars Arcade, and Space Harrier failed to generate much enthusiasm. The general attitude seemed to be, why bother with a skit when I can have a Saturn? Of course, that's easy for the Japanese to say. Some of us won't get Saturn until later in 1995. Time Warner Interactive, present at CSG for the first time, is spreading its wings with plans to develop for both the PlayStation and the Saturn. Its first project due for release is Tama, CPH75. The Saturn version is only a month away, but the PlayStation will have to wait a little longer. TWI is also developing virtual racing for the Saturn. Irrespective of the quality of the Daytona USA conversion, it looks a certain moneymaker. Capcom's Baron Patch appears to be continuing, despite an announcement that its current arcade success, Darkstalkers, aka Vampire, is on the way to the PlayStation. All it had were Super Famicom games. Rockman X2 and Captain Commando, and Mickey and Minnie's Magical Adventure 2 again. NEC, a company whose games division is aimed almost exclusively at the Japanese market, also showed up. Playable demos of the finished PCFX units included the same selection of, it has to be said, very Japanese, software seen at the Tokyo Toy Show, although the majority are nearing completion. Also circulating on the NEC stand were rumors of the company's future plans. Several sources claim that NEC is already working on a successor to the upcoming PCFX system. Finally, the ambitious shoot-'em-up, their words not ours, in development for the PCFX, is to be a 3D remake of Space Invaders. Very ambitious. Not. Let's read a little bit of these extra little things. Saturn gear. Accessories for the Saturn were recently shown at the Electronics Show in Japan, which took place a week after CESG. Around time of launch, Sega will release a multi-tap adapter for up to 7-player games. Connecting 2 machines enables up to 12 to play, as well as a mouse, a steering column, in time for Daytona USA, hopefully, and a RAM card, which boosts the system SRAM backup capacity 16-fold. It's interesting that Sega had a JVC version of the Saturn. I had no idea that thing existed. Nakayama speaks out. Sega's president Hayao Nakayama has publicly voiced his fears about the impending console battle. There will be chaos, he recently told the Japanese business press. Sometimes we will win and sometimes others will win. For certain we will survive. Whether as number 1 or number 2, I don't know. He added, Sony is a much stronger company than another company I can't name, answers on a postcard. Sony has much more experience in the consumer market. The price was right. As next generation goes to press, a few weeks remaining before the launch of the Saturn and PlayStation in Japan, speculation about their final prices are still rife. Mirroring Sega's concern about Sony, see story opposite, an SE official commented, "We feel anxious about other companies' actions. We are aware that we can't keep Sun forever, so we'll announce the price in good time." Analysts in Japan have assembled possible price brackets for each of the coming machines. One thing is clear, it looks like it'll be a consumer's market. The Saturn between 43 and 48,000 yen. PCFX currently available at 48. PlayStation available now for 30,000 to 43,000 yen. I wonder why all the yen prices are come at 800. Like, I'm rounding them, but it's 42,800 to 47,800. Can't be taxes, so maybe it's just like a luck thing. It's the Japanese version of our, like, 0.99 or 0.95. Ultra 64, on sale September 95, you wish. Price 25,000 to 29,000 yen. For the available now, price 40,000 yen. Make it so. Star Trek, The Next Generation, a final unity. This is a PC game of Star Trek, The Next Generation. It's funny, did I know this game existed? Maybe. UK chip delivers 3D power. Next Generation visits a UK-based company with designs on the global PC graphics market. British-based hardware designer 3D Labs has developed a new chip that could revolutionize PC graphics performance. Called Glint, the 64-bit custom graphics accelerator is designed to take on all the rendering-intensive 3D work usually handled by the PC central processor, leaving it free to perform other tasks. You can produce 300,000 Gouraud shaded and depth buffered polygons per second, as well as offering texture mapping, alpha blending, anti-aliasing, and fog effect capabilities, which easily put it on par with the custom graphics hardware found in next generation consoles. Most existing PC accelerator chips are used primarily for uses other than games, spinning off windows or enabling video playback. While the current crop can be used for game enhancements, Delmark claims that with custom drivers, a contemporary accelerator boosts a 486's performance from 320x200 resolution to 1024x768 resolution at 25 FPS while running Flight Sim Toolkit, a gain of 8-fold in memory handling. Glint could well provide game designers with graphics power previously only dreamed of. Let me look this up. Um, Glint 3D Labs. All right, I looked into it, and it seems that this chip is actually going to mostly be, in the long run, used in like the CAD and digital content creation markets. So this is not what will eventually power the graphics card that we all knew and loved and used in our PCs. Still interesting to read through. The Glint story begins in 1983. We couldn't even afford a garage, recalls Osman Kent, president of 3D Labs. My partner had us in Kilburn and had one in the southwest of London. His house was called the headquarters, while mine was a technical site, with customers calling at these places, some really prestigious customers, and some of them didn't even realize that they were in the right place. Kent's company has undergone numerous changes since those humble days. In 1985, 20% of it was sold to FICOM, providing a cash injection that enabled work to start on a project called the GJP, which was intended, in Kent's modest words, to be the world's fastest graphics engine. A year later, Kent brought the chip over to the US. No one was expecting us, he says. We came out of nowhere, this tiny company with world-leading technology. The pedigree of the GJP was immediately recognized, leading to Crossfield's Electronics investment in 1986. But the biggest boost to the company's fortunes came in 1988 when it was bought for $12 million by DuPont, one of the world's 10 largest corporations. Now named DuPont Pixel, it received research investment of $20 million over the next 6 years and was granted several key 3D patents. The Glint project was started in 1983 when the company was still under the aegis of DuPont. We began development of the 3D graphics chip that would use all the 3D know-how we had accumulated so far, says Kent. It was a real mega device that even SGI wouldn't have attempted to do. But it became apparent to us that there were markets outside the high-end systems we were concentrating on. So my partner and I decided to go it alone. Thus was 3D Labs born, a company with the resources to take on the world. The success of 3D Labs is due to a combination of technological expertise and business acumen. Although many firms have produced powerful graphic accelerators, most have fallen by the wayside due to the problem of persuading developers to support a non-standard product. A significant step toward overcoming this obstacle was made in 1990 when Kent entered talks with SGI to license its OpenGL system. At the time, Kent was focusing on Sun Spark workstations, and SGI was wary of licensing its 3D graphics libraries. Kent managed to overcome SGI's reservations and secure one of the first licenses, with the result that Glint became the first single-chip device to support OpenGL. This was a crucial development given that OpenGL is used as an API, application programming interface, by the industry powerhouse, Microsoft. It is supported by Windows NT products and will also have full functionality in Chicago. Windows 95? Probably. Good name for Windows 95? Both Motorola and Intel acknowledge Glint as a significant step towards bringing fast 3D rendering to the home market. Many graphics card manufacturers like SPEA are excited by it. However, Kent denies rumors that Nintendo is planning to incorporate Glint technology in its new VR32 system. More concrete is the involvement of Singaporean sound card manufacturer Creative Technology, which has taken a minority stake in 3D Labs with the aim of creating a combined graphics and sound card. Another move illustrating the multidisciplinary collaboration that Kent hopes become a standard in the computer industry, 3D Labs has teamed up with London-based RenderMorphics, whose own API, Reality Labs, features built-in support for Glint. Reality Lab is a Windows-based authoring system that enables games to be created in a fraction of the time consumed by traditional programming methods. To prove the system's power, RenderMorphics produced a true 3D engine running with 256 textured colors at 15 FPS in less than a day. With Glint installed and auto-detected by Reality Lab, these figures would be closer to 32,000 colors and 50 FPS. Argonaut, the creators of Nintendo Super FX chip and Star Fox, also developed B-Render, designed specifically for games development that specializes in fast texture mapping and offers Glint support. Of course, developing a world-class product and selling it to the world are two different things. 3D Labs proposes the price, the basic 300SX is $150 each for purchases of 10,000 units. Another version of the 3 300TX with far superior texture mapping ability is aimed specifically at arcade developers who, says Kent, have shown considerable interest. By making it unnecessary for developers to adopt new standards, Glint has already leaped the first hurdle in the race for acceptance. Of course, competition is just around the corner. Chip manufacturers including Yamaha were supplying Sega with chips for Saturn. Matrox and new startup Cinema have all plans to produce similar 3D accelerators. Presumably, ATI Technologies, Waytech, and Cirrus, who currently produce accelerator chips for Diamond, Orchid, and Matrox boards, won't die without a fight either. But if Glint's plan comes to fruition, then the graphics chip standard could eventually be dominated by a single firm to the same extent that Intel dominates the home CPU market. And that's what the PC sorely needs in order to survive. The architecture. I wish I understood this kind of diagram more. Alright. And this is fine. We can skip this part. Movers and shakers. A monthly look at the business news that affects the gaming world. Huizinga wept. Newsline. That was Wayne Huizinga, the guy you rent movies and video games from all the time, dabbling happily at his eyes as he watched his own Blockbuster Entertainment, his CEO, marry Viacom, Beavis and Butthead Nickelodeon back in the fall. So who cares? Bottom line, you do. You're looking at the future of the interactive entertainment business, the one-stop shopping approach. Huizinga knows that a major consumer distributor, Blockbuster, in bed with a major content provider, Viacom, is a marriage made in interactive games heaven. Think what you'll enter by from Wayne's world. Sega Atari, tell the lawyers to kiss and make up. Newsline. Relations between Atari and Sega are much improved now that Atari has dropped its patent infringement lawsuit against Sega, and the two video game manufacturers have inked a deal allowing Sega to have rights to use more than 70 Atari technology patents. Also, Sega has bought 4.7 million shares of Atari stock. Why the sudden shift? Bottom line. The reason that the Atari Jaguar video game system has had the visibility of a stealth bomber stems from the fact that Atari had few funds to properly market the system. Now, with 50 million licensing money and another 40 million from the stock sale, Atari is mounting a nationwide Jaguar attack. For Sega, the litigation was a drag, and Atari's technology gives Sega more opportunities and a strategic partner. Speaking of Sega, Newsline. Sega's section of Disney World's Innoventions High-Tech Pavilion in Orlando has, not surprisingly, turned out to be the most popular exhibit for kids. Sega's H.L. Bud Werner, Vice President for Merchandising, says that 750,000 people are moving through on a monthly basis. Bottom line, yet another coup for Sega President and CEO Tom Kalinske, who brainstormed the idea with Disney's Michael Eisner a couple of years back. Rumors have been surfacing that Kalinske and his winning strategies at Sega are of keen interest in several companies, including Disney, who are looking for top talent. Winning strategies, next couple of years will maybe show that that's not quite the case. Nintendo proves what goes around comes around. Newsline. It's 1988 and a good number of retailers are privately grousing to anyone who listened that Nintendo of America, NOA, is browbeating them into taking what NOA wants them to take, or do without. Now it's 1994 and NOA is guaranteeing it'll buy back any unsold Donkey Kong Country cards that don't sell through. Bottom line, with retailers already queasy over the possibility of a drop in the 16-bit cartridge video game market right now, and with Sega having cleaned Nintendo's clock last year on 16-bit sales, NOA is making sure that DKC doesn't end up DOA. A less cynical view might allow that Nintendo does have high confidence in the new title and is daring retailers not to sell the card through. Don't worry, it's selling. Is IBM about to buy Apple? Don't laugh just yet. Newsline. What's with Apple's computer stock up and down recently as rumors that Motorola, IBM, or AT&T might be interested in purchasing the company? Bottom line. Expect the volatility to continue. While IBM and Motorola are working with Apple on PowerPC computers, they're still very competitive with one another. but both IBM and Apple face market share problems that could make a marriage, once unthinkable, a salvation for both. If not a marriage, some sort of investment in Apple may be immediately in the offering for IBM. Is summer CES gone forever? Newsline. So, how is it that the Electronic Industries Association had such a popular January Consumer Electronics show, all space sold out, but had to postpone the summer CES until '96 in favor of Electronic Entertainment Expo? Bottom line. Well, two things really. One, Infotainment World and knowledge industry publications had the foresight to place E3 in LA. Easy access for the bulk of software companies. And more importantly, it's an all-entertainment show, not having to share a software focus with a hardware focus. Video games represent 12% of the January CES, with other software and interactive segments representing a total of 20%. The interactive entertainment business is getting too big to be a subset of a consumer electronics show. Ooh, 3DO faces mutiny by game developers. As 3DO's manufacturers balk at absorbing $200 million in projected losses, angry games producers face a $3 fee on each game produced. At a recent meeting with 3DO developers, Trip Hawkins broke the news to Sanyo, Panasonic, Goldstar, and Creative Labs that combined they face losses of more than $200 million over the next 15 months if 3DO players are to remain at a competitive price point. Unsurprisingly, this news was spectacularly unwelcome. Without a revenue-generating plan to ease the manufacturer's burden, 3DO could have found itself in serious risk of 3DO factories around the world grinding to a halt. Unluckily for game developers, Trip Hawkins had a plan. 3DO games developers are to be taxed $3 per copy of every game they make. This is on top of an existing $3 royalty as part of the original 3DO deal. This new revenue will provide a market development fund, MDF, half of which is believed to help manufacturers' profits, and the rest spent on marketing 3DO. We have a significant window of opportunity this Christmas, and the MDF program allows us to take full advantage, argues Cindy McCaffrey, 3DO's public relations manager. We anticipate the MDF program to dramatically increase the installed base through increased consumer awareness. Fine, but this was news to game developers, who are already finding it tough to make money on 3DO publishing. Most were shocked by the news, and a few even questioned 3DO's right to impose such a burden out of the blue. Tom Zito, CEO of Digital Picture, comments, "It makes me rethink developing for 3DO. We have consulted with our attorneys and believe that this action by 3DO is illegal." John Eastburn, CEO for Crystal Dynamics, adds, "This would be a lot easier to swallow if 3DO had met its commitments in building an installed base even before imposing a price increase. Even with the MDF, the 3DO licensing arrangement remains the best deal in the industry," says McCaffrey. A view echoed by Rocket Science's CEO Steve Blank, who signed on with 3DO to release Lodestar after the MDF deal. This is simply 3DO putting on its pants just like every other hardware vendor. Now 3DO is on par with everyone else. Next Generation can only conclude that 3DO is gambling all it's got in one big push this holiday season. The MDF is not a long-term plan for success, and Trip Hawkins has to realize the danger of deterring software support, but right now he has no choice. "If I don't have software companies, that's one problem, but that's not as big of a problem if I didn't have hardware manufacturers," he commented. If Trip gets past this Christmas still breathing, the 3DO will be an extremely valuable platform in 1995, surmises Blank. But if the marketing generated by MDF fails to push 3DO sales over 500,000, then, having sacrificed a lot of developer goodwill, it could be game over for 3DO. Arcadia. An insider's view of the coin-op business and how it affects the games you play. Arcade owners vote Killer Instinct Best New Game. At recent Amusement and Music Operators Association, AMOA, Expo in San Antonio, Texas, the men and women who place coin-op video games in arcades and other locations voted Midway's MFG's Killer Instinct as the best new game of the fall. It's a major honor, but almost as political as the Oscars. For example, does the award mean Killer Instinct is more fun to play than Virtua Fighter 2 or Rave War? No, the voters weren't even shown in those titles. Most of the voters don't play video games anyway. The vote really means businesses expect to make more money with less service headaches from Killer Instinct in arcades, 7-Elevens, and similar stores than from anything else aside the Expo. By the way, last year's winner was Mortal Kombat 2. National Amusement Network. Ready to turn your video game skills into cash and prizes? Starting in 1995, a nationwide electronic arcade will enable players to compete in local, regional, and nationwide video game tournaments. A newly formed corporation called the National Amusement Network, Inc., Nani? Plans to use modems to link up 100,000 coin-operated games into very sophisticated circuits managed by Electronic Data System, EDS, the owner of the world's largest private digital data network. Players will use joystick and buttons to log onto the nice. This is stupid. Sega bought the Data East Pinball. Yeah, it's fine. Oh, the Virtual Boy. VR32, a clearer picture emerges. Since its announcement in April, Nintendo's 32-bit VR32 system has been the subject of much speculation, conjecture, and general misunderstanding. Nintendo plans to dispel all preconceptions when it unveils the hardware at the Shoshinkai show in Tokyo on November 15, a full 6 months before it's expected to go on sale. Pin-sharp details are still elusive, but it is now believed that the VR32 Virtual Boy will be a portable, battery-operated unit which accepts cartridges and will either be attached by a lead to a Vizor headset, see below, or come as a lap-integrated unit. The display will be based on an oscillating mirror-generating stereoscopic projection technology developed by Reflection Technologies, Inc. It is possible that it consists of a monochrome display which can be projected up to 3 feet in front of the player as a stereographic image. Before news of Nintendo's deal with Reflection Technology was announced, pundits had previously believed that Nintendo had tied the knot with one of 2 alternative players in the VR industry. The first was Virtual I/O, manufacturers of fully engineered HMDs that use non-immersive technology. That is, it's possible to see around and through the HMD, which reduces the danger of tripping over the dog, falling in the bath, etc. But a conflict of interest, Virtual I/O is developing an HMD for TCI's Sega Channel, presumably stood in the way. The second company, a Renmin-based Think About It outfit called RPI, was known to hold some important VR patents. The technology has never been seen in public, however, and the company was known to have been involved in serious negotiations with another hardware manufacturer. Whether Virtual Boy will feature an HMD is still a major undisclosed issue. Many pundits believe Nintendo will shy away from HMD for a fear of potentially massive health risk. Anyone remember Steve Martin and The Jerk? But the financial incentives of producing the world's first half-decent VR setup may be simply too great to ignore. The alternative, viewed from a distance, lap-integrated units seem a lot more likely. Expect the full next-generation report next month. It stinks! Partly because the red in it takes over everything, and it didn't really have a lot of good games. That's the problem, right? It cost a lot, and the games were not great. Generator. A look at behind the scenes of game development, rumor, gossip, and scandal. Good day to you. I'm Mark James Ramshaw, and this is my very own little corner of Next Generation magazine. Having recently finished a stint producing games for Sony's PlayStation, from now on you'll find me here, reporting back after a busy month of chat and gossip with the key developers in the game industries. This is a kind of an introductory piece to forgive a lack of hard fact. I want to set the scene for what's to come. There's a new optimism in the land of games development. Programmers and designers have always been frustrated by the limitations of the hardware with which they've had to work. But that's all changing. With high-spec PCs in so many homes and development kits out there for 1995's Trio Super Machine, they finally have the processing power to produce the kind of images we've been dreaming about. But which of the games will come out on top? John Norledge, head of software development at Virgin Europe, explains, "We were producing software for everything. Sony PSX, Sega Saturn, 32X, Jaguar CD, Philips CDI, and PC CD-ROM. Virgin's commitment to all formats reflects the fact that the industry really isn't sure what machines will dominate. It also highlights the relative portability of software on the various systems. We produce a range of titles which we believe are strong, then convert them to the most suitable platform," said Norledge. "In the case of many of the products we started 2 years ago for PC, we're not converting them to 3DO. When we design games now, we're relying on being able to render high-quality graphics on the fly. The PSX, Saturn, and Nintendo machines will all give us the freedom to do this." Yep, graphics are what it's about now. Real-time, textured, light source polygons are where it's at. The actual games are unlikely to ever get that complex. When it boils down to it, we all simply want them to look and feel more believable. Peter Molyneux, head of Bullfrog, responsible for Populous, Powermonger, Syndicate, and now Magic Carpet. Boo! Oh, I hated playing Magic Carpet. Ugh. Has this to say on the subject of graphics and yields a perfect 3D graphic system. It is an interesting time we're in, but also quite distressing. All the sport developers are having to reinvent the wheel every time new hardware is introduced. With Magic Carpet, we've got our own little 3 engine working away, and the results are very nice. We'll be using an updated version of that engine for the next Project 2, Syndicate 2. When it comes to developing for new machines, it's not as easy as it first appears. Our engine is great for the PC, says Molyneux, and we breathed a great sigh of relief when the PSX was announced. After all, it's got 3D routines built in. But it's not that simple because Sony's system isn't appropriate for our needs, so we must go back and redo all our 3D systems again. Each time we think we've created the ultimate engine, a new development can mean you've got to go back again. It's very frustrating. With in-game graphics, the ultimate goal is, of course, to have enough polygons moving fast enough and enough colors to produce near-TV quality images. About 1 million light source textures, polygons, and 16.8 million colors at 640 x 480 to just about do the trick. That's when we'll be able to control a believable image of James Dean in the latest Hollywood heartthrob in real time. Now that's still a ways off, between 6 and 10 years, I'd say. But even now, we'd have a new dawn for the new... Sorry. But even now, we're at a new dawn for the video games industry. In-game image quality has improved tenfold in the last couple of years. So join me next month as I take my first dive into the deep end of the games industry, go fishing for the latest developments, and deliver them to you with a winning smile. In the meantime, have a blast with the rest of the issue. Alright, and so that concludes the news section. We've only been recording for an hour and a half so far, so I think I'll just read through this hardware comparison thing. And then we're going to call it for today. Players. 1995 will see the hardest fought system wars of all time. As 3DO, Atari, and Philips scramble for market share, Sony, Nintendo, and Sega circle for the kill. So who's going to come out on top? Next generation profiles the contenders. Progress is inevitable. And as the age of 16-bit dominance draws to a close, all eyes are now fixed firmly on the future. The renaissance of PC gaming witnessed over the last 18 months is testament to the fact that gamers are demanding more. And with a decent PC setup now costing in excess of $22,000, that would seem to be at any price. Of course, the PC scene will continue to thrive. As long as PCs continue to be used at work, they will continue to be used for play. But it's the dedicated games machine that will drive the future of interactive entertainment forward. They're all targeted at the mass market. Anything over $500 just isn't in the picture, affirms Sega's USA's top executive Tom Kalinske. And they're designed purely for high-end games playing. Each of the 9 systems profiled over the following pages is aiming for the top, but the market can only support 3, maybe 4 mass market formats. Some will fail. The question is, of course, which are going to make the cut? The following profiles aim to evaluate each system as it stands today. Some are already in the stores, some are on schedule for release until a further 12 months. All will be after your investment in the scramble for market shares. That is why you need next generation, because when caught in a crossfire, the biggest platform wars ever, you need reliable information. CDI. Philips's accidental games machine could just possibly be the tortoise in a field of hares. Originally held back by clumsy design, a lack of quality games on a high price point, Philips has recently carried out repair work on all areas for CDI. But, as the core technology inside CDI looks back on its 10th birthday, is it too late to make a real impact? As opposed to the VCR-like 220, the sleeker 450 model sells for $299. It actually looks like a games machine and is supported by a library of around 150 titles, the majority of which are games. 220 model remains at $499 with some extra features, but uses exactly the same technology. There is also a Magnavox unit at $399. It is Philips' realization of the importance of the games market that has led to its rethinking on the CDI. A senior company executive candidly admitted recently, I think it's fair to say that Philips didn't properly appreciate the key role of games in its software catalog. They sidelined games development when they should have mainstreamed it. Philips will be hoping that CDI's reputation as a leading-edge system machine will be boosted by the arrival of Burn Cycle, reviewed page 94, released at the end of October. The firm bundled the title, which it describes as the first real CDI blockbuster, with a 450 unit in November. The 450 remained at $299. Meanwhile, the CDI 550 shipped in late October. The new model is actually just a 450 unit bundle with Philips DV cartridge and sells for $499. The DV cartridge is currently available on its own for $249. Halfway through 94, Philips' global install base was estimated to be at around 400,000. It claims it is still on target to reach its goal of 1 million CDI units sold by the end of the year. CDI will attempt to increase its mass market penetration in 95 when it launches a TV with CDI built in and a hi-fi system with CDI replacing the standard CD audio unit. Both are due in the first quarter of 95. In truth, CDI's only game-playing trump card is the DV cartridge, which enables movie-quality video footage to appear in its titles. Of course, the gameplay value of games featuring extensive use of FMV, full motion video, is perennially questioned, and hence the one advantage of the CDI turns into something of an albatross. Philips finds itself in a position of not only having to defend itself as a viable game system, but also defending a strongly new game genre. So how strong a card this really is remains to be seen. CDI's best hope for continued game support is to get units into homes for other reasons, for movie CDs, photo CDs, or audio units. A stable games market will then inevitably follow. We're going to skip the tech specs, that's fine. Key software, Burn Cycle, reviewed on page 94. Trilobyte's The Seventh Guest. And Voyeur, one of the first innovative uses of FMV in a game, only with CDI. Genesis 32X. Definitely not just a stopgap. Sega pumps up the Genesis. Again. The Genesis market may be on the wane, but Sega seems determined to keep the machine alive well into 95 and beyond. This will be done mainly through the plug-in peripheral 32X. It's due for a launch around the globe in time for the holidays. In the US, it's priced at $159. Problem is that no one really knows Sega's thinking behind the 32X. Is it genuinely a platform they will be committed to in 1 year's time? Or simply a way of grabbing extra 1994 mind and market share in the absence of the bigger prize, Saturn? Either way, Sega is scheduled for 6 titles to be available at launch, and are promising plenty more to come throughout the year. Of the first crop, the 3 most promising are Star Wars Arcade, Doom, and Virtua Racing Deluxe. All would be 32X cartridges running only on Genesis until units that have the peripheral attached. 32X CDs should come through in the new year. Again, these will only run on Sega CD combos, which have the 32X attached. Clumsy, but it works. Third-party support is due to the market in the first half of 95, but most publishers seem to be limiting their commitment to what they see as merely a stopgap measure. Electronic Arts, for instance, without doubt the most prolific Genesis publisher of the past few years, only has plans for 1 or 2 32X titles. That said, it's worth pointing out that one of those titles will be the 4th in a series of Strike games, after Desert, Jungle, and Urban. It's provisionally titled Strike Core. Set in 2008, the game involves a threat from alien, rather than human, foes, and it will be exclusive to 32X when it's launched in the second half of 95. Desert Strike, what kind of game is that? It rings a bell. That's like a chopper game. Came to a lot of stuff, not just Genesis. I guess it came to the Genesis first. Okay. Key software, the Mortal Kombat 2. UK-based probe promises an arcade-perfect version of Williams' coin-op. ID Software Doom, and 32X Virtua Racing. Though Doom is not full screen, that's funny. They couldn't probably run it at the good enough FPS if they expanded the screen. I never played the 32X version of Doom. I've seen it's pretty crappy, but it's probably not as bad as the Super Nintendo version or the Game Boy Advance version. Ooh. Jaguar. Atari's 64-bit attempt to recapture the glory days of the VCS suffers from a cruelly ironic lack of software. In the early 1980s, Atari's world-conquering VCS died, smothered under an avalanche of poor-quality games. Video game lore has it that there were more copies of E.T. the Extraterrestrial manufactured than there were VCSs in existence. Going into 1995, the main problem for Atari's reasonably impressive card-playing sort of 64-bit cart, see tech specs, has been lack of software. Up until this holiday season, there have been just 7 titles available for this machine, although the firm is hoping to have about 30 on the market in time for the holiday season. The highlight of the holiday's release schedule is undoubtedly Aliens vs. Predator, probably the first game, other than the stunning Tempest 2000, to really show what Jaguar can do. But there's precious little else to get excited about. The Jaguar CD drive was due for release in late November. It is priced at $199 and software support will be limited this year. At launch time, there will be 4 Jaguar CD-ROM titles: Demolition Man, Battlemorph, Blue Lightning, and Highlander. The drive will use Cinepack for compression of the videos onto CD, but Atari does have plans to release an MPEG-compatible cartridge in early '95 to enable video CD standard titles to be played. The firm's problems remain a lack of software and funding. Atari claims the software problem is already being remedied by titles such as Alien vs. Predator and a number of third-party titles. But having suffered financially in the last decade, remember that the firm hasn't really had a global mass market product since the VCS. Atari simply doesn't have the muscle to compete in market spending terms with giants like Sony and Nintendo. A recent bonus, however, came in September when a deal was announced by which Sega is paying Atari $50 million over 7 years for the use of Atari patents, and additionally buying $40 million of Atari stock. The increased cash position will be used, among other things, to improve a marketing position this fall, said Sam Tramiel, president and CEO of Atari Corp. If 3DO's Trip Hawkins is correct, however, when he says that you need $500 million in capital to be a real competitor, see page 6, then this windfall is still merely small change. You wouldn't see next generation turning down, however. The Jaguar will have to succeed largely on shipping out first and on its own technical merits that will only become apparent when the software support for the machine increases dramatically in both quality and quantity. I think the Jaguar is pretty terrible. Atari Jaguar. A total of only 63 games were released. It was discontinued in 1996. Ooh. Oh, it's interesting. The Jaguar became open source. The patents were released in the public domain. Its best-selling game was Alien vs. Predator, which sold 50,000. It was very highly rated too. NEC FX. This one I know nothing about. The PC Engine outsold Sega's Genesis in Japan, but now NEC looks for a more global platform. The FX, a curious-looking machine resembling a PC tower, is NEC's latest attempt to muscle into the global games market. The 32-bit CD machine has been in development for more than 4 years now, and is an ambitious replacement for the PC Engine, which made little headway outside of Japan. Released in the US under the name of TurboGrafx, the PC Engine maintained a small cult following of gamers reliant on whatever software was imported from across the Pacific. In all honesty, it's unlikely that the FX will ever manage much greater penetration into the mainstream, but as long as the machine sells well enough in NEC's homeland to warrant developers' attention, then you can be sure a constant trickle of games, just enough to keep small pockets of die-hard US gamers happy. Those gamers already bitten by the NEC bug will be disappointed to learn that CD PC Engine software will not run on the new offering. It is, however, compatible with NEC's PC98 and can be used as a CD drive for the machine. FX was due to hit the Japanese market in November, but NEC has not made any decision yet about launching it in either the US or Europe. Due to this price at the yen equivalent of around $400, but NEC believes it has to bring the price down considerably when it decides to attack the US market. So far, there are only a handful of third-party publishers, all of which are Japanese companies. In fact, very little is known about the initial software support. NEC claims that around 15 titles are in development, but it is giving away very few details about individual games. 4 or 5 should be available before the holidays. NEC's forecasts for FX sales are not too ambitious. It expects to sell 50,000 units in Japan in its first year. Not the kind of numbers to set Sony, Nintendo, or Sega right into the corporate privy and terror. So while the NEC FX may prove to be a competent gaming platform, modest ambition, a strange design, and lack of software support do, however, seem to limit its chances of being the first machine to bring NEC any real games market success beyond the limits of its home country. This generation will continue to cover products of the FX until it's possible to determine if anyone really cares. Okay, let me actually look this up. NEC FX. The PC FX. It was indeed not released in the US. And it does not look like this. It legitimately looks like a tower PC. Which is kind of cute. Only 62 total games. Most of them, I'm sure, very targeted at Japanese taste. Most of the games don't even have their own Wikipedia page, so that kind of tells you something. Alright. Neo Geo CD. SNK embraces CDs as the savior of Neo Geo, but can CDs deliver the same arcade feel? The prohibitive cost of software, some titles more than $200, has always kept SNK's card-played Neo Geo very much in the specialist category, a luxury item for extremely dedicated and extreme wealthy gamers. The recent launch of a CD unit in Japan, however, could finally introduce this impressive technology to the mass market. The machine has been launched in Japan as a limited edition, 30,000 units, front-loading model with a price tag of just under 50,000 yen, equivalent to approximately $525 in US currency. Encouraged by the response from consumers and determined to secure continuing software support, the firm has now announced that it will manufacture a top-loading system to be made generally available at a lower price, probably in December '95. Internally, the only difference between CD and card version is the addition of 7 megabytes of DRAM and a slight tweaking of VRAM and DRAM. The transition from cartridge to compact disc has proven difficult for everyone. These new hardware features are simply SNK's solution to the problem of speed. The most crucial advantage of CD is the more affordable software price. Neo Geo cards are spectacular because of their sheer size, some weighed in at over 150 megabits. All that memory costs an awful lot of money, and yet even the largest games will fit into a CD and still will carry a price tag between $50 and $80, equivalent to about 30 to 50 pounds. Unfortunately for existing Neo Geo owners, the CD drive is not being offered as an upgrade, but as a standalone machine. Still, anyone rich enough to have bought one of the original probably won't balk at more investment. SNK's plan is to release cart and CD versions of all its titles, carts appearing first, followed by CDs within a month or so after. It's also busily converting many of its old cart hits to CD. So far, SNK can only claim 2 third-party publishers, but with a large library of its own titles, SNK has already accumulated 25 Neo Geo CD titles. The firm hasn't announced any plans for launching the US or Europe, but it looks like that both territories will be targeted next year. Question marks hang over how a Neo Geo CD game will feel. Certainly the main attraction with Neo Geo's cartridges is the arcade-perfect speed, look, and gameplay. If the addition of a CD drive messes with this popular, if not necessarily successful, bring the arcade game home feature, then it is difficult to see how SNK can really compete with the big boys. Samurai Showdown and the fighting games are essentially the key software. But they also, in the key software, they mention how the CD games can take up to 50 seconds to load from CD to RAM, which is maybe not great advertising for it. And here comes the king. I only got to it much later. I was a Nintendo 64 kid. But undoubtedly, partly because of how easy it was to mod, the PlayStation was the true king of this particular generation of hardware. With the most powerful gaming system ever devised, Sony's grip on the world's leisure time looks certain to tighten. The Sony PlayStation is currently many insiders' hot ticket, guaranteed to make a huge impact since its November launch in Japan. Sony has reputedly invested $500 million in the project, and the marketing hasn't even started. The feeling is that Sony will spend whatever it takes to make PlayStation a success. Go figure. PlayStation is Sony's second bite into the video game pie. In 1988, a collaboration with Nintendo to develop a Super Nintendo-compatible CD drive failed to reach fruition. But the lure of huge potential profits ensured that all R&D and industry connections gleaned from this abortive foray were kept on the back burner. And now Sony is turning up the heat. One insider at Sony Europe recently noted, "I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is Sony's most important launch ever. It won't fail." Sony is predicting sales of 3 million hardware units in the first 14 months in Japan alone. Ambitious? Maybe not. It is not already clear that Sony isn't going to have a force on its new baby onto a reluctant market. The tech specs and glimpses of software so far unveiled have had both game players and developers who've got development kits started filling around and in 2 weeks set something like Radmobile up and running, begging for more. Strong software support is essential to success, and Sony is hoping for 15 titles to accompany the Japanese launch, including 3 titles from its own publishing stable. With the addition of strong support from Namco, Konami, and Capcom, all are planning arcade cabinets utilizing PlayStation technology, and the acquisition of UK-based developers Psygnosis, I don't know how to say it. Psygnosis. Sony promises to provide not just the chips, but also the salsa. Sony isn't saying how many titles it hopes to have in time for a US launch in the third quarter of 95, but instead points to the 400 developers and publishers signed up as PlayStation licensees. The software avalanche seems guaranteed, with one major coup already secured, when Konami King Williams announced that it had signed a deal giving Sony exclusive home console rights to Mortal Kombat 3. Both the arcade version and the PlayStation CD should be launched next spring. Snatching this surefire crowd pleaser from under the nose of Nintendo is indicative of both Sony's bullish plans and the eagerness of industry to do business with the company. Nintendo had previously signed a broad alliance with Williams, including the joint production of Cruis'n USA and Killer Instinct, that seems set to fuel Ultra 64's progress with a string of coin-up hits. Although this deal remains in place and Nintendo will be publishing some Williams games exclusively on Ultra, MK3 isn't one of them. An MPEG-compatible video CD peripheral is to be sold separately at very low cost, is currently being considered by the firm, perhaps as a nod toward multimedia ambitions in the future. Certainly Sony's got the intellectually copyrighted connections, or just to keep up with the competition. Either way, this will complement the innovative joypads and the steering wheel peripheral planned for launch with PlayStation Ridge Racer. So what's it going to cost? And next generation goes to press, there's no fixed news. It will certainly be under 50,000 yen, $325, but the rumor is that it could be considerably lower. Sony has pulled off pricing surprises in consumer electronics products before, and a US price of under $250 can be ruled out. Sega and Nintendo execs will have been trembling in their boots as rumors of Sony's willingness to send a $100 loss on each hardware unit, the company will make it back all on software sales, started circulating last month. Games look to sell at around $40-50, although how financially attractive third-party licensing and manufacturing deals will be, huge sales projection aside, remains to be seen. There are a couple of interesting extra features currently in the PlayStation pipeline. One is potential for multiplayer machine link-ups. The base unit will come complete with a serial lead, enabling it to be connected to another machine. There are also plans for an adapter that will enable up to 8 machines to be linked. Essential for such game as Namco's Cyber Sled or indeed Ridge Racer. And 2, there will also be plug-in RAM cards on which players can save game scores and data. It's hard to overestimate the amount of grassroots support PlayStation has in the development community. Whether this is found in unconsidered opinion, a desire to work for anyone but Sega or Nintendo, although there's no evidence that Sony will be any less rigid in quality assurance or third-party licensing deals, or simply an excitement born of playing with any hot new toy, is unknown. But it is as near to an accurate barometer of who the smart money is on as anything else. Those who would talk down PlayStation point to Sony's lack of experience in the game industry and an apparent blasé attitude to the need for quality software. The first Sony ImageSoft products were dreadful, and they haven't set the movie world alight either. But all in all, a very, very impressive package. Just don't mention Betamax. Key Software, Ridge Racer, Toshinden, and Cyber Sled. Saturn. Amid rumors of a back-to-the-drawing-board redesign, Sega keeps its 32-bit cards close to its chest. Although the machine is due in Japan this holiday season, Saturn remains shrouded in mystery, and Sega of America remains strangely muted on the subject. Although, as any card dealer will explain, you don't advertise 95 models while you've got a showroom full of 94. And right now, Sega claims it's focused solely on 32X. So far, it is mainly other people who are doing the talking. What they are saying is that Sega has spent the last 9 months or so playing catch-up with Sony after a publisher friend tipped Sega off about the power of PlayStation. New specs and development tools only recently arrived with third parties, superseding Sega's original description of the project. The main difference between them is apparently the addition of more dedicated processors, taking work away from the 2 CPUs. Certainly, the original Saturn technology was old. Commenting on the US launch of 3DO in '93, Sega of America President Tom Kalinske revealed that we have a more powerful machine already waiting in the wings, but the time's not right yet. But these last-minute improvements, while no doubt improving Saturn's capabilities, may mean a problem with initial software support, either being thin on the ground or not showing Saturn's true potential. This is thought to be the issue at the heart of an intense debate within Sega. There are also reports of debate about when Saturn should be launched. While the spring '95 launch date was suggested in the US, Kalinske is now understood to be pushing Saturn's arrival to the latter half of the year. At that time, Sega will supposedly be awaiting stronger software support while relying on 32X to keep gamers excited. There is also strong rumor that Saturn that appears in the US and Europe will actually be an enhanced version of the machine that is about to hit Japan. Sources close to Sega, however, insist that there will be no major overhaul and that any changes will amount to no more than a bit of tweaking to boost Saturn's ability to handle polygons, an area where Saturn, inspired by Sega's AM1 arcade board, is already strong. Indeed, the most impressive software will initially come from Sega's conversions of its own coin-op titles, such as Virtual Fighting and Daytona USA. Yu Suzuki and the AM2 development team are very much Saturn's ace in the hole. And because Saturn supposedly shares some of the same technology that Sega's arcade machines use, the firm is hot to promote the idea that what you can play in the arcade today, you will be playing at home on Saturn tomorrow. But don't kid yourself. The Daytona USA scene in the arcade is leaps ahead in terms of processing power in comparison to the stripped-down Saturn. There will, however, be a Saturn version of the Sonic coin-op. Some original work aimed at Saturn specifically is also underway. One title, Clockwork Knight, has been in development for more than a year and is set to be a flagship game for the format. There is very little word from third parties on Saturn. This is probably due to the late arrival of the development tools and the inevitable confusion of the possibility of Mark II even before the launch of Mark I. Another interesting feature of the whole Saturn project is the Sega Channel, Sega's interactive TV play-by-cable system. Currently on test in 12 sites in the US and Japan and due for national opening sometime in December. The Sega Channel is a joint venture between Sega, Time Warner, and TCI, the cable's company. It's widely believed that the channel's games-on-demand, multi-user gaming, and preview functions could well revolutionize gaming and push Saturn to the top of the heap. It's all about connections. If all this sounds pessimistic, then it could simply be through a lack of reliable information. Whatever Sega has nailed down for Saturn in terms of a US release, it's keeping the information firmly hidden in the shadow of 32X. But with Virtua Fighter, Virtua Racing, Wing Wars, Desert Tank, Daytona Racing, and Virtua Cop all available for straightforward, if not automatic, conversion, Saturn is not lacking a respectable software library. And these guys are Sega. It's not like they're lacking the knowledge or the experience to make this happen. More will be known after the Japanese launch of Saturn this holiday season. Read the full report in next month's Next Generation. Clockwork Knight. It sounds rings a bell. It's like a platformer or something. And then Panzer Dragoon, of course, is famous. Ultra 64. Nintendo's joint venture with Silicon Graphics yields plan for a 64-bit console that could be ahead of its time. Scheduled for a September 95 debut in both Japan and the US, Nintendo's 64-bit console will probably be the last to enter the market. But the firm is determined it will arrive with enough impact to wipe out any lead that Sega and Sony might build. So is history set to repeat itself as Nintendo once more misses the boat? The 16-bit SNES never got close to catching up with the first out-of-the-box Genesis. Or is Nintendo simply refusing to be rushed? It's very interesting how modern perspective really changes these things, right? Like, the particular generation, for me, quality of games, it would be Super Nintendo over Genesis any day of the week. But Genesis was trouncing Super Nintendo in the actual market, and that's because this was still a very much arcade-focused time, right? But, yeah, it's fascinating. In this case, however, the problem with the Nintendo 64, cost of cartridges, lack of third-party support. Honestly, the only reason that the Nintendo 64 didn't completely tank Nintendo's stock is just how perfect some of those early games were, like, out of the boat. Super Mario 64, sure, looks very simplistic, but boy does it feel fucking good to play still after all these years, you know? Like, Nintendo managed to create the canon for a lot of 3D genres. With Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Star Fox 64, just so many, like, absolute classics. And that's the only thing that saved them, because otherwise PlayStation was very much eating their lunch. The problem is price, as we were just saying. Nintendo has promised to bring Ultra 64 in under $250, but this will be difficult. Out of curiosity, it's traded at $199, which is equivalent to $410 in 2025. But compared to the Sony PlayStation video game console. Oh no, I didn't mean to skip. Why is it so hard to find a Wikipedia page? Here it is. PlayStation console. Yeah, it was actually $100 cheaper than the actual PlayStation when it launched. Though I would not be surprised if PlayStation slashed the price to be equal to the Nintendo 64 when that one came out. Equivalent to $600 in 2025 is what the PlayStation 1 launched at. Fascinating. Okay. But this will be difficult. SGI's Indie Workstation, the heart of Ultra 64, retailed for $6,500 at the announcement of Project Reality, as the joint venture was dubbed, and economies of scale are limitless. Already a CD drive has been sacrificed. Sticking to cartridges reduces the price by at least $150, comments Peter Main, Nintendo of America's sales and marketing director. But what else need be left behind as the Dream Machine is stripped? Of course, Nintendo claims it prefers cartridges anyways, but a CD drive for Ultra 64 looks almost certain for launching after the arrival of the base unit, although probably not before the 1995 holiday season. Mean claims that Nintendo certainly has not turned its back on CDs. We've already done a lot of work in that area, but we don't believe that, as yet, the public has been convinced CDs can deliver the sort of games that they want. Ultra 64 has been designed to allow for CD add-on and will make a move when CD fulfills one or two criteria. Either we can deliver a drive at the right price, which plays games at the right speed, or there is a demand for products that simply don't require speed. There you have it. Main also revealed that any Ultra 64 CD drive would probably come with a price tag of around $150. Ultra 64 arcade cabinets have already been launched under the Midway label. Cruis'n USA and Killer Instinct are now on the streets. Nintendo insists that home versions will be pixel-perfect replicas. The company added that in the case of Cruis'n, the console version will actually be better than the arcade game, as full Ultra 64 tech specs weren't available when work started. Williams' 32-bit board was used in the absence of a completed 64-bit Nintendo setup. In fact, there's controversy as to if there's any similarity at all between the innards of these Williams coin-ops and the final Ultra 64 hardware. But at the very least, there are two solid game designs in place for which Nintendo has exclusive rights. So far, only 3 third-party companies have signed up other than Williams: top developers DMA, Rare, and leading SNES publisher Acclaim. 2 more will be announced before year's end. Nintendo claims the initial software lineup will emphasize quality, not quantity. Final development tools available in January will herald additions to the list of elite firms that have been in on Ultra's from the ground floor. But even then, there won't be an avalanche of third parties. We're not looking at 25 good titles, we're looking at a handful of killer breakthrough games, each one having no parallel in anything that has gone on before, says Peter Main. Success in the next generation is based on delivering a quantum leap in gameplay, not just horsepower in hardware. Ironical, then, is the news that only titles confirmed for a launch of Ultra 64 are Cruis'n and Killer Instinct, a driving game and a fighting game, with plenty of parallels to lots of games before. It is known, however, that Rare has already started work on Donkey Kong Country 2, and that this may go straight and exclusively to Ultra rather than the SNES. Meanwhile, Nintendo Japan's Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario and creative force behind Star Fox, DKC, and Super Mario Kart, is rumored to be busy on a 64-bit game starring some Brooklyn plumber. He's also been quoted as having desire to work on a version of Pilot Wings for Ultra 64, and now news reaches us that his wish has been fulfilled. Definitely one to look forward to, as long as it doesn't result in having to wait longer for a new Mario game. The average size of the first batch of carts will be 24 to 32 megabits, while Nintendo is claiming that through compression technology in the hardware, they will contain the equivalent of 100 megabits of gaming. Whether this technology will also enable third-party publishers to develop for the Ultra 64 as profitably as with the CD-based systems remains to be seen. It's worth remembering that CDs cost less than $1 to manufacture, a cartridge costs well over $20. Either way, when Nintendo sticking to its guns and claiming that carts are not outmoded, overpriced storage method in what seems to be the CD age, Ultra 64 games will cost roughly at the same as current SNES titles, $50 to $70. When we find stoplights in Saturn's Daytona and PlayStation's Ridge Racer as a result of disc accessing, we'll know Nintendo was right. And I guess last but not least, no, kinda least, 3DO. Trip Hawkins' Dream Machine is here. It's now. But can 3DO compete against the Japanese giants? With a poor start in the US, a reasonable start in Japan, and an indifferent start in Europe, 3DO has so far failed to live up to its pre-launch hype. Then again, that may not be entirely 3DO's fault. The hype was incredible and not all of the firm's own making. Looking back, it's plain to see everyone got far too excited and expected far too much from what was the first glimpse of life beyond the Genesis SNES duopoly. Such is the press of pioneering. 3DO CEO Trip Hawkins would no doubt say. Now the tide is turning. A series of price cuts, along with a range of software growing in quantity and quality, spearheaded by Electronic Arts' Road Rash and FIFA International Soccer, some encouraging projects from Crystal Dynamics, and morale-boosting even if only in a look, we can do it kind of way. Completion of Capcom's Super Street Fighter Turbo have given the format a more competitive edge. The machine now sells for $399, half of its original $799 launch price. In Japan, the current yen price converts closer to $300, a lot more realistic. This holiday, there will be around 75 titles available for 3DO, the vast majority of which are games. And with 9 more months having the market largely to itself before the Japanese giants close for the kill, 3DO is looking at a big opportunity to anchor itself for the storm ahead. Read Next Generation's exclusive interviews with 3DO CEO Trip Hawkins on page 6. 3DO puts its worldwide install base at around 200,000, but refuses to break the figure down into territories. The firm claims that there are 800 development systems in the field, that approximately 250 projects are in development, and that around 100 new titles will arrive in 95. Virtually all of the major publishers in the world have now signed up as licensees. The notable exception is Acclaim, which still has to be convinced about 3DO's mass market potential. Just the one black sheep, then, but a fairly significant one, and perhaps indicative of just how far 3DO has to go to reach mass market status. The November add-on MPEG card should open up the video CD library to the format. The peripheral would sell for $249. Meanwhile, more hardware brands are on the way. In the US, Panasonic's model was joined by machines from Creative Labs in late October and Goldstar in early November. Neither has announced pricing details yet. Sanyo has already released a unit in Japan but won't hit the US market until next year. Samsung and Toshiba also have plans for 3DO players but have yet to release any details. Almost everyone is hoping for a price war, especially 3DO. Next autumn, the format will be boosted by the arrival of a plug-in accelerator called M2, formerly known by its codename Bulldog. Developed in conjunction with IBM, Motorola, and Matsuhita, the M2 is built around a customized 64-bit PowerPC chip. It has been designed to enhance 3DO's polygon processing power, and, the firm claims, will make 3DO about 5 times more powerful than Sony's PlayStation. Ambitious words indeed. There is no word on price yet, although Trip Hawkins has promised that it will be competitive. Industry pundits expect M2 to arrive at around $150. Any more may simply be unpalatable to the installed base of 3DO users. M2 will be initially available as a 3DO peripheral, and the range of M2-specific software that will run on a standard 3DO without the add-on will be limited. An all-in-one machine will be offered during 96 and will run alongside the current 3DO, which will, at that point, be selling at a lower price as an entry-level option. That's if 3DO lasts as a serious contender. Many game developers are looking at 3DO's performance this holiday season as a make-or-break decision time for further development. And already some publishers have expressed dissatisfaction with their returns on expensive development investments. 32-bit multimedia titles featuring FMV, more labor-intensive graphics, and development retooling doesn't come cheap. Let's not underestimate 3DO's big trump cards. 1. It's here now. 2. We know exactly how much it costs. 3. Some great games already on the shelves. An insider offered, "We always said how important our 18-month head start was, and now you're seeing that. Of course, people came after us saying we're going to do something better, but as they finally get to market, we've come back in right on their heels, dropping the next thing that is so far in front of them that suddenly they're 2 years behind again. Everyone else is just packing vaporware, and we know how reliable that is." Yeah, as we said before, 3DO will actually not last the 2 years. I still can't believe $800 in 94. Introductory price was $700, equivalent to $1,590 in 2026. That is insane. I'm not surprised they had to slash the price by half to even be able to sell any. Alright. And I think that is where we will call it for today. Next time we'll catch up and read the Violence Tapes, which is sort of an interview between Next Generation Magazine and for people associated with like bloody or controversial games. And then we're going to look at the previews and the reviews very briefly, not too long. and then wrap up the magazine. But in the meantime, thank you for watching and listening. This was record reading for Next Generation Magazine, issue number 1. Other things happening on the channel at this time. Let me double check my content calendar. We are gonna have a brand new Hidden Gem premiering this week. The conclusion to Shadow Man in 2 weeks. The playthrough of Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition is going to continue next week. Life of Timmy, of course, is really running towards its conclusion in just a few more episodes, so make sure to go check it out. Give it a little extra love. I really enjoyed creating Timmy's world and planning it and sort of planning the details of it. But it's probably time to let it rest for a little bit while we explore other things. But until then, Record Reading will return in 2 weeks with the second part of Next Generation Magazine. Thank you so much for watching. This is Nick, signing off, reminding everyone to let's keep retro playing together.